Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Relationship Renovation podcast. I'm Tara Kerwin.
And I am EJ Kerwin, and we are excited to be here. We're going to do something. We're going to cut right to the chase today. We're going to do an exercise. We just had a podcast recently about staying connected when you're struggling with intimacy in your relationship. And now we're going to sort of go through an exercise that we use in our programs, both a relationship renovation at home and relationship renovation in office, that is sort of the beginning of staying connected for a lot of couples in their intimacy.
I had this idea because, this is what we take all of our couples through. This is what we designed for us. And I think that if we model it, that it's going to be very helpful for other couples to see what it looks and feels like. For the purpose of time in our podcast, we're going to kind of keep our answers a little bit shorter than they normally would be. So don't feel like they can be as long as you want them to be. But the exercises you'll see over the next few podcasts, we start with like the early foundation of intimacy. And then we really move into like some deeper stuff. But it's really important to get that idea of like that early foundation. And so it's just 10 questions. EJ and I are going to go through the 10 questions. I'm going to show you kind of what that process feels like, model that. I'll list the 10 questions at the end of the show. And then please feel free if you guys need us to like email you them or send them over. Like we are more than happy to do that. Okay.
Yeah, and that's also a nice little segue there as far as interaction with our audience. We love it. It makes a huge difference. It helps us create content that's more engaging and exactly what you want. So always feel free to reach out to us through our social media channels, through Relationship Renovation, hit us up with an email, info@relationshiprenovation.com. The more you tell us what exactly it is that you want to hear about, the better we are at delivering what's useful.
Okay, so let's get right in.
All right, let's do this.
So we have an intimacy series in our program, and it comes after the communication series. And this is the first part of the series. There's 4 parts. And in our program, it's called Let's Talk About Sex Part 1, the Early Foundation. So that's what this lesson is. And I think we're just going to kind of ask each other questions back and forth. Does that sound...
Yeah.
You ready for it, EJ?
Yeah,
it's been a few years.
I'm super excited. I love this.
Okay.
One thing, let me appreciate. Can I give you an appreciation right now?
Yeah.
Okay. I love, not just in our podcast and our business, but also our families, Tara is amazing at structure.
I try.
And man, not everybody is good at that. And she going into this podcast and knowing like you got this structure and
I got it down.
It makes me sort of relax. I think sometimes it makes like really busy minded people to have a partner who's structured. It's sort of like, it's sort of soothing. So thank you for being a structured person, Tara.
Thank you for being appreciative. Okay, so let's get started.
All right, let's do it.
I'm staying on structure. So the first question, and we always try to get the questions to ask, with each other. So what did we learn early on from our family about sex? Would you like to go first, or would you like me to?
Sure. This is one of those cases where I'm glad that my parents don't have the attention span to like listen to an entire podcast.
Are you sure?
I don't know.
Sorry,
Mom,
Mom and
if
Dad,
you're out
if you're
there.
listening. Yeah.
Okay, so what I learned, I got some interesting messages from my family because it was always clear my dad was really attracted to my mom. He had some funny sayings he used to say. This is like, they'll die if my dad used to always like walk in the house and he'd tell my mom, he'd say, "Take off your pants. I think I love you." And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he was always like really like, he showed my mom that he was attracted to her and she was receptive to it. And so I got the message that in a relationship, that attraction is important and it's present. So I got that. But then the other message though I got was that you don't talk really in an in-depth way about sex. Like I joke, can I just quickly, I had 2 conversations about sex with my parents. Both of them happened when the electricity went out in our house. And both of them, like one, I won't do both of them, but one of them was, "Do you know what a condom is?" And then I said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay." And so that's about as deep as we've ever like we've always got like uncomfortable when sex scenes come out in movies and stuff. So I got that like attraction is important, sexuality is definitely in relationship, but no roadmap for how to actually talk about it.
Wow. Okay. That's
How about
yeah.
you, Tara? What are
Well,
the messages you received
I
from your
would
family?
well from I kind of want to just like really make sure that I heard you
Oh, well,
correctly.
thank you.
I heard that you got to see a lot of like playfulness
Mm-hmm.
and flirtation that was healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that so you knew that like intimacy and sex was like a part, but that you didn't go too in depth around it and that you didn't have deeper conversations. And then when it came time for like parent child relationship conversations about sex, it was condom, yes, cool, good.
Pretty nuts and boltsy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did I
Yeah.
kind of okay, perfect.
Yep.
Okay, what did I learn early from my family about sex? I'm trying to keep this short, but that it was very unsafe. That it was with multiple partners, that it wasn't monogamous. And I remember, I mean, and if my mom listens to this, oh well, like, remember when I was 14 and I think my mom was like, "Are you still a virgin?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "What'd she say? You're going to be the last American virgin or something. Like, basically, go and have sex now." Like that, like, if I didn't have sex, there's something wrong with me. So, what the messages I learned, I know that's pretty vulnerable to put out there into the world. The message I learned was very confusing. I had no healthy role models. I had nobody except for maybe sex ed in seventh grade talking about whatever private parts. And I learned that it was very confusing and bizarre, and that if I wasn't doing it, something was wrong with me. So it was very confusing.
So what I heard from you is that it was really confusing, the messages, that it wasn't monogamous, and the overriding thing just in your tone I heard was it didn't feel safe.
Yep, that's about it. Okay. There's your first question, everybody.
Yeah, dive right in.
So the second question is, how has our family of origin influenced how we talk about sex?
Well, for me, how it influenced it was I've had to just sort of figure it out on my own. I'm not sure if another question is coming up, because I think was greater around just like sort of like atmosphere and other influences, but just that like I don't know how to talk about it. It's definitely helped being a therapist, like, because I've had to figure out how to talk about it. But yeah, like simplifying it on the most basic level is that I just came out being like, I have no idea, or do you even talk about it?
Okay, so what I heard you say is that you kind of had to figure it out on your own, that you didn't even know that talking about sex was a thing, really, that you're a therapist, so you understand the importance of it now, but that there was really this like kind of lone road of you trying to figure out it on your own.
Yes.
How influenced about sex, talking about it. I think I always thought of sex as shameful from my early messages, early experiences that I've had. So I would do anything and everything to avoid talking about anything that would produce shame. Of course, until, I've done my work and I can do that. But
All right, so I heard you say that the way it influenced the way that you talk about sex or communicated about sex is that it was shameful, and that it led you to just avoid the conversation in general, isn't that interesting for both of us? Like, I don't know how to do it, and you don't want to do it.
right. See, and we don't even know. This starts so early on, everybody. This is why we're doing this modeling of the exercise, because it helps you have insight into why it wasn't happening in the first place.
It helps you also understand that it's not just something uniquely broken between the two of you, but it has to do with a sort of like your infrastructure that brought you into the relationship. That although we've been together over a decade, that even the struggles we might have now, a lot of them have to do with stuff that we both came into the relationship, which is normalizing and feels like, it's kind of a relief.
Okay, moving on to the third question.
And again, when you're doing this, you can take a lot more time. You can
Yes.
slow it down. We're just kind of doing this for the sake of the podcast, making it a little bit quicker.
Okay, what other external sources influenced our beliefs and perceptions about sex as a young person?
All right, you might have to throw on the brakes for me if I go to, Catholicism. I grew up in the Catholic faith, and it was just immensely influencing in how I communicate, understand sex, because it was like, it is bad. It is bad, except for the one person that you eventually find that then it's okay. And which is very paradoxical and confusing, especially as a young person, that you learn about it, because who talked to me about it? Priests, and that was super weird. And so, yeah, my outside influence mostly was religion. Yeah, religion had a big impact on me and my understanding, figuring it all out.
There's a second piece to that question, really quick. So it was, what other external sources influenced our beliefs and perceptions about sex as a young person? And then how did it impact us on an individual level and in our relationship?
Well, for me, it just reinforced internalization that maybe, and this is like a connecting point for the two of us, is it felt really unsafe. Like, I remember one conversation in general with a priest that was just like, this is freaking weird. And so it reinforced just like, figure this out on your own, keep it to yourself, don't be honest. That's the way it affected me, pretty, significantly. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I heard really a lot of, you learned that sex was kind of not okay or shameful until you fell in love with someone, then it was okay. So a lot of confusing messages, because basically you build up this fear around it for decades, and then you're supposed to marry someone and it's like, oh yeah, no, intimacy, sex is good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very confusing.
And that it would keep you kind of internal, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I needed any more reasons to internalize and stuff.
So for me, I would just say, I don't necessarily know if it's a Western society thing, but I just feel like I would see women often being sexualized, even in middle school. And so I felt like, oh, that's how that's how you're loved. You're loved because you're sexy, or people want to make out with you, or it was very sexualized. Your self-esteem comes from people wanting you in a sexual way. And I think it impacted us in our relationship is because that just feels so wrong to me. It feels like I have so many other pieces to me that are so beautiful. And when it feels like it's just about sex, which I know it's not, but that's how it felt, I get to this oppositional resistance. I'm not a piece of meat. Do not objectify me. And that is that. And then I would stay alone in that process, but definitely feeling unsafe as well.
Yeah. So what I heard you say is that sort of the external, sort of societal, sort of gender role messages you took in, where a woman's self-worth is all built around her sexual desirability, and that the way it affected us is that you felt like that was a significant part of why maybe I loved you, and that you didn't like that, I'm going to take off my EJ hat for a little bit and go into my therapist hat for a second. What's so interesting is, I think, knowing what I know about you, is that it really once you got into a marriage, right? That you wanted to be absolutely loved completely, and carrying that old belief into our marriage, especially once we went through some intimacy struggles. That's a huge piece that I'm, if I was a therapist, I would be working with the two of us around wow, that was a shift for her. And that's gotta be very common for, in the gender specific area around those messages women have. And then when they get into a really complex, loving, long-term relationship, a big roadblock.
Absolutely. I'm going to kind of put the next two questions into one. So, because I think they go well together, but What are our individual beliefs about sex and how have they changed as we matured?
Ooh, these aren't the easiest questions.
I
Like,
know.
that's why we ask them for couples.
And this
That's
is
why
just
we,
the entryway into our
yeah.
intimacy series, everybody.
Individual beliefs about sex. That it's important in a relationship. I mean, definitely that's a belief that it's important that, and like unhealthy belief versus healthy, like that I came in thinking it should just naturally sort of like organically be good, or be healthy or be robust or whatever. And the way that affected me was it gave me some poor skills in actually navigating a healthy sexual relationship because I didn't know how to talk about it. I knew it was important, but I assumed it should just be, really consistently wonderful. And when there were struggles, I wasn't equipped to deal with it.
And now, as you've matured,
As I've matured, I realized that it's something that is very important. It's not everything, and it doesn't just happen by accident. That there's a lot of components that create a healthy sexual relationship, and that it's important for us to be sort of united, and I can't figure it all out on my own.
so what I heard is that your belief about sex is that it's important and it's healthy in a loving relationship. And that kind of early on, also the assumption that like it should just be easy and happen kind of got you stuck in some areas, especially when we were going through our intimacy struggles. But that as you've matured, you really are starting to understand the complexity and the importance of talking about it in many different dimensions.
Yes, I feel heard by you right now.
I'm so happy. This is why we all, therapist hat really quick, we always do that. Let me make sure what I heard is true. It kind of forces you as the partner listening to listen. And it also allows the other person to be like, wow, I feel heard. And if I did get it wrong, EJ can be like, actually, hang on. It's more a little bit like this. This is like such a huge piece of communication. So I'm strongly encouraging you, as you go through your own questions like this, to do exactly what we're doing. As I heard this. So, okay, next question. Oh no, me. I have
Yeah,
to
you got
answer.
to answer though.
My beliefs about sex used to be it is how I am loved, that if I'm a good sexual partner, like I'm enough, that it was the most important thing in a relationship. Yeah, and that's how like love was measured by was sex. And as I've matured, I'm realizing that the sexualized environment I grew up in was very unhealthy, and that I'm not an object, and that it's much deeper and softer than that, and it's an all integrated whole, and that I have to connect my whole self together in order to truly feel present in intimacy, because it used to just be about, am I enough?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I heard you say is the way it affected you is that you thought it was almost everything in a relationship, and that it was also the way you sort of had value. And that what you've matured into is an understanding that you are so much more. And yeah, that love is not just about your sexuality.
Bingo. Yeah, I feel very heard. Okay, so we're almost halfway through. The next question is it important to have sexual intimacy in our relationship, and why?
Yes, it's important to have sexual intimacy in our relationship. I mean, it's important because it's not the only, sort of piggybacking on what you're saying, it's not the only, but it is a unique portion of our relationship. Our agreement is that we only connect in that way with each other. And so it's important because it's it's another way. It's one of many ways that we can connect and we can show our love and we can have fun together. And it's just sort of, and again, this isn't for everybody. This is just for me or for us, that it's just us. It's one of the only things where nobody else enters into it, you know, like parenting and work and running the household. Everybody else sort of sneaks into it. And it's one of the only areas that is just uniquely ours.
So I heard that, yes, it is important to have sexual intimacy in our relationship because for you, it's like very unique to us. And it's the one thing that no one else can kind of jump into. Do you know what I mean? Like parenting, kids stuff, right? Working, co-working, all that. But that like having sexual intimacy is unique between the two of us. And so that feels really special.
Ding, ding, ding. You are correct.
Okay. For me, it's absolutely important to have, it used to not be. I was like, no, it's not. Like, that is not the most important thing. But I think it is important to have sexual intimacy in our relationship because it lets us connect in a deeper way, in the most vulnerable way with each other. And that's my goal in my relationship with you, is to connect on every single level. And sexuality is a huge part of our human existence, you know?
Yeah. So I heard that, yes, it is important, and it is important because it's a vulnerable, unique way in which we can connect.
Okay, next question. What, if any, are our fears around beginning to talk about sexual intimacy in our relationship?
You know, at first I was like, well, let me jump back to, but even though we do talk about this frequently, still every time, especially if I initiate the conversation, there is some fear and reluctance and some apprehension. And so my fear is that it's going to create conflict. My fear is that what my needs aren't important. My fear is that it just won't be a fruitful conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hear that fears around beginning to talk about it are that it might lead to conflict, or it might lead to you being rejected or needs not being met, or that you're not important.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I would say I don't have fears anymore. I used to. I don't have to get into them, but like I really feel very open and curious about having intimacy talks. Yeah, it's like my anxiety has truly, 2 months ago, I'd probably been like a wreck. Like I'm still really nervous, but right now, because we built emotional safety in that area, I truly am not afraid of talking about intimacy.
Yeah. I hear that now you feel a lot of safety around talking about it and that you're comfortable with it.
Next question kind of piggybacks on that. What might be the obstacles for us in talking about sex?
The right time. Having time and the right time, I think, are the biggest. It's like, when is the right time to talk about it? For me, that's like a thing, because it's not like, oh, what are we doing this weekend? You know, or who's taking so-and-so to school. And so just having having the time and having it be the right time, I think for me is a big, like, always like sort of like a question.
Okay. So I hear that some obstacles for you, time and finding the right time, and like, you know, it not getting squished into like that daily busy schedule that like, if you don't make the time, that it's just not going to happen. And so that could definitely be an obstacle. I love that. For me, I would say uncomfortable feelings such as shame, insecurity, low self-esteem might be an obstacle for us to talking about sex. Again, I'm moving through my own shame and insecurity, so that doesn't feel like an obstacle anymore, but absolutely was that there in the beginning, right? Especially with my own history of trauma. And so just really recognizing, is that a part of the process? Because you don't, you want to be able to move through that so you can talk about it in a healthy way.
Yeah. So what I heard is the obstacle for you is that it might bring up feelings of shame.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another just like quick teaching point is like, I had this part of me that wanted to start editorializing or analyzing it, and I cut it off and I said, nope, I'm just going to use that drive-in voice. I'm just going to repeat what she said, that it's about shame. I don't have to get into my opinions or whatever, because if I do, oftentimes then Tara won't feel heard.
Yeah, I'll just totally like block you out. Okay, 2 more questions, you guys. Thanks for hanging in there. Hopefully this is helpful. Okay, do we notice resistance or defensiveness around exploring and discussing sexual intimacy? And if yes, how do we understand this?
Yes. 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 I think there is still resistance. I think the way I understand it is that there's been ups and downs in the process. And I think we're much more highly attuned as humans to the more difficult moments, and I preserve those more closely in my mind. And so the obstacle is that, like, wow, this has been hard before, so like maybe we just shouldn't do it.
Yeah, so I hear you saying absolutely there's defensiveness and resistance in exploring, discussing sexual intimacy because it's been clunky and there have been many times it's gone wrong. And so there's still that fear of like, it's going to go that way again. And so that is still there, but it's better. Did I hear that part? Okay.
Yeah,
Am I making my own?
Didn't. You editorialized a little bit, but
Shush.
but yes, it is. It is better, and I just have to resource that. I have to resource the fact that, like, oh, actually, this is much better than it used to be.
For me, I'm going to kind of go back early on because there was a ton of resistance and defensiveness around exploring sexual intimacy because of my own shame. That is how I understand it to be now. At the time, I didn't know it. I kind of saw EJ as just the person to blame. How dare he have a how dare he have a sex drive? And that, why, if I have this shame and I didn't really know it was shame, but why would I want to feel that? I'm good. Now that I can understand and know what it was and where it came from and how it's not mine anymore, like I don't carry that shame, that's where I don't have any more resistance or defensiveness. I truly feel open. But in the beginning, for me, it was shame.
The obstacle I hear again is shame.
Darn word.
And also you mentioned in there, let me just make sure I heard it right, was this like sort of uncomfortable feelings about me. I think you didn't use the word resentment, but you said like just for me even having a sex drive that you were confronted with negative feelings towards me. So your own shame and negative feelings towards me are the obstacles.
Absolutely. And shame keeps us stuck and it kept us stuck. So there you go. Okay, final question. Are there dynamics in our sexual relationship that are confusing and need guidance and understanding?
Oh, that's a complex question. Say it one more time.
Are there dynamics in our sexual relationship that are confusing and need guidance and understanding?
I think the confusion is just how different our experiences are. And we talk about this so much. We have 2 episodes of high frisky, low frisky. We have our last one, how do we stay connected, in building a healthy, intimate relationship. I think the confusion lies in how do we sort of meld our 2 very different experiences. That for me is confusing. I'm like, how do I like connect with Tara when we're facing such different obstacles?
So I hear for you, it's confusing because we have such different ways of perceiving and experiencing it. And like, how do you even start to like take those different experiences and meld them together?
That sounds good. That sounds right.
For me, dynamics that are confusing right now are still like, I'm still kind of in this process of exploring myself. And I guess it's like, okay, because I think because you had the higher sex drive, you were often the initiator in our relationship. And I remember I didn't like that because it felt like I wasn't equal in the initiation piece or that it wasn't coming from me, that was like my caretaking piece. Like, oh, he initiates, I can tell he wants it. So like, I'll see if I have the space or availability. And so I'm still like, my confusion now is like, okay, I'm going to feel my own desire when it happens. If it does, awesome. If it doesn't, it's okay. And I'm going to start to like initiate. And that's different for me from the last few years, maybe not in the beginning. And so I'm like really kind of playing around with that initiation piece.
Yeah. I mean, I heard the confusion revolves around sort of the initiation, who's the pursuer. What I heard there, I think also is just like confusion around like roles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Of like, how do we form healthy roles and who are each of us in our intimate sexual
used to feel
relationship?
A one-sided role, right? High frisky, low frisky. That was your role. That was my role. Yucky. No, doesn't feel good. Okay. So I'm going to really thank you for going through that and listening to our vulnerable conversation. I'm going to go through these questions, I'm going to say them out. And that way, if you guys are going through this on the podcast, you want to just hit pause after every question and go through it. Just make sure you're picking a time that works for you. If you want us to email these to you, please reach out. Here we go. First question. What did we learn early on from our family about sex? Second question. How has our family of origin influenced how we talk about sex? Third question. What other external sources influenced our beliefs and perceptions around sex as a young person, and how did it impact us on an individual level and in our relationship? Next question. What are our individual beliefs about sex, and how have our beliefs about sex changed as we've matured? Next question. Is it important to have sexual intimacy in our relationship? Why? What, if any, are our fears around beginning to talk about sexual intimacy in our relationship? What might be the obstacles for us in talking about sex? Do we notice resistance or defensiveness around exploring and discussing sexual intimacy? If yes, how do we understand this? And finally, the last question. Are there dynamics in our sexual relationship that are confusing or need guidance in understanding?
So, I mean, this gives you a launching point to a really open-hearted, enlightening conversation with your partner. If you can, give it a shot. Just pick one. Pick one question and let your partner know. Don't surprise them with it. But like, hey, I checked out this podcast. Are you willing to listen to this first and then do this together? So, definitely a tool for you guys to begin to have some really interesting conversations. I would definitely also just put out there that like, if you find it really difficult, then maybe really important, and maybe, we have relationship renovation at home, which this is from that, but it's 2/3, 3/4 of the way through. And so maybe part
of the process.
Yeah. So, relationship renovation, it is about building a healthy foundation, having a structured approach where you and your partner over a 3 or so month time period really understand one another and create familiarity with getting to questions like this is going to be really useful. And in every show note, we have a link to Relationship Renovation at Home. You can even download a sample and check it out. Go back, listen to High Frisky, Low Frisky. We have a lot of information around intimacy because it is a very important but also a tricky conversation to have with your partner. So hopefully you all found that helpful.
We want to support all couples in having a healthy sex life.
Absolutely. Why the heck not?
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for listening. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Me and you just singing on the train. Me and you listening to the rain. Me and you, we are the same. Me and you have all the fame we need. Indeed, you and me are we.
When you drive the brand ranked #1 in dependability by J.D. Power, you can stop thinking about what you can't do and start doing what you never thought possible. Visit your local Kia dealer today to see yourself behind the wheel of the brand ranked #1 in dependability by J.D. Power. Kia, Movement that inspires.
Call 800-333-4KIA for details. Always drive safely. Kia received the fewest reported problems among all brands in the J.D. Power 2022 U.S. Vehicle Dependability Study based on 2019 models. See jdpower.com/awards for 2022 details.
When you think about something that brings out the best in us, it usually involves helping someone else. By donating plasma at a Grifols Center, you can help save millions of lives and show your good side to the world. You'll join thousands of people who donate safely each week, so patients get the plasma-derived medicines they rely on. And you'll be rewarded up to $1,000 your first month. Learn more at grifolsplasma.com.